The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.
Hello, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineering Watch Radio, Global Alert News, episode for April 2nd, 2016. This show has no sponsors. We pay for it out of pocket so we can say what we want, and so we can have enough time to get across enough information to make a difference, or at least to try. Another week of the runaway juggernaut of insanity that is the human race's military-industrial complex has passed. And what we face on our planet right now, and it doesn't matter who denies this, what we face is not just ecocide and genocide, but omnicide, the systematic destruction of all life. This is a mathematical fact. Doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. It's true. And the ramifications can't be hidden much longer. On that note, in spite of all the denial we hear from many sources, people that claim we're alarmists, that we're fearmongers, that all this information is simply comparable with Bigfoot and swamp monsters, and we hear this a lot from people who don't want to face reality. Those of us who are trying to sound the alarm hear this from many, many people. But it's our obligation to try to get out the truth just the same. So here's a headline. Another headline. We cover headlines every week that most media doesn't cover and most people don't want to face. But here's another one that I'll elaborate on a little further into the show. The latest data indicates that within the next 30 days, half of the Great Barrier Reef will die. Half of one of the 7 wonders of the world will die in the geologic blink of an eye. I'll elaborate on that more in a bit. Last week also, I went over a how to stay healthy protocol, at least what I do, not recommending anybody necessarily do what I do. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physician, I'm not trying to give medical information to anyone. I'm simply outlining what I personally do after many years of research, and I want to share this, and I hope people will seek their own information from nutritionalists that I'm sure everyone has in their region. But I'll revisit that issue and finish what I started last week. Further on in the show, how to stay healthy in a world that isn't. Weather update. Well, it's off the rails all over the globe, isn't it? And more people are waking up to that fact. Finally, how bad does it have to get? How many engineered snowstorms do we have to have in the continental U.S.? About 1 a week. Does that seem natural to anybody? That every week you have a new named snowstorm? We have Winter Storm Troy this week. Does this not seem like complete engineered theater week after week in spite of record warm temperatures everywhere, headlines about ice caps melting, reefs dying in the blink of an eye? I mean, we're talking about huge ecosystems here. By the way, the Great Barrier Reef is the largest living organism on the planet. Half of it is going to die in 30 days. So, again, while all this heat is going on, and the ocean's dying, or the reefs are dying because of that heat, record temperatures everywhere, we have an engineered snowstorm every week. We have the Weather Channel paid liars trying to explain to us again. I know it sounds like I say this every week, because I do, because it happens every week. And I hope some people take the time to watch the Weather Channel and see if you can't tell the degree of lying that's going on. It's not hard to see through. So the Weather Channel, again, paid liars, try to explain to us yet again how we can have 80 degrees and tornadoes on one side of the storm and blizzards on the other side. If that seems normal or natural to you, you need to recheck your reality. I want to say it again at the beginning of this show. How do we stop climate engineering? And I'll get to a lot of other headlines that tie all this together in a moment because everything's connected. Everything is connected. It's important that people understand that. But I focus on climate engineering, as I've stated over and over and over, because it's not just climate engineering. In fact, engineering is way too dignified a term for what's going on in our skies. It's simply an all-out assault against the web of life. So, with that in mind, even superseding events like Fukushima, and I don't underestimate the gravity of Fukushima at all. I fully understand that Fukushima may kill us all if something else doesn't first. I fully understand that 3 reactors are in full meltdown with no end in sight. They don't even know where the fuel rods are. Fukushima is a horrific problem. But every breath we take is an even bigger problem. And when you can't walk out your door without existing under a toxic cloud of constantly sprayed heavy metal aerosols and chemicals and polymer fibers raining down on us, inhaled with every breath, building up on our body, killing everything, contaminating soils, waters, disrupting weather patterns, that can't go on, or we won't be here much longer. And all of us are getting dumber by the day. There's no question about that. So we're back to climate engineering. Why is it so important? How can we stop it? And as I've stressed over and over and over, critical mass is how we stop it. All of us are responsible to help reach critical mass. All of us can make a massive difference in that effort. And in the course of waking others up, it's also imperative that we put those on notice who are helping to hide these crimes, those who are, in effect, accessories to these crimes, like our media, like our weathermen. And this is why I regularly bring up people like Mike Mangus with KRCR, ABC affiliate, and Mike Kruger, the chief meteorologist, and all those meteorologists that are there that either are unbelievably derelict in their duty and completely unqualified for their job of weather forecasting. If they're unaware of what's happening in our skies, they are not qualified to do their job. That's one possibility. Second possibility is they're lying. They know exactly what's going on, and they simply don't have the courage to tell the truth because their paychecks and their pensions matter too much. So we need to give people like this notice that when the public wakes up to what's happening, I can only imagine that they'll be held responsible. And when you email information about geoengineering to people like this, like our local ABC affiliates here, wherever you're at, wherever you're listening to the show, find the public contacts for agency people, water testing, meteorologists, environmental reporters, and send them credible data about climate engineering and CC as many reputable people as you can who would also live in that area and also know or should know who you're corresponding with, which meteorologist, which reporter, and so on. Make the largest list of not BCC but CC so that the meteorologist, reporter, or agency people you're sending something to know that a lot of other credible people are also seeing that communication, so that the people that we're putting on notice about geoengineering, so that they know that a whole lot of other people also know that they know. Does that make sense? I hope so. We all need to engage in this everywhere we're at. We need to move the ball forward every day. We need to notify other agencies, groups, and individuals that would care about the fact that we're facing omnicide from an atmospheric aerosol assault that's killing everything. So we can all play a huge part in this play. We can all help to change the flavor of what we face if we simply try. Don't think someone else is moving the ball up the field. That's not the case. It's up to all of us together. And even the legal efforts that I spend a great deal of my time on behind the scenes, legal efforts in Canada and the US, even those efforts are ultimately designed to reach critical mass. That's the point. And once we do, and once the families of all those participating in these programs, or all those helping to hide it, like the meteorologist and the news affiliate reporters and so forth, when their families understand what they're hiding, we're going to have a different paradigm. And we need to reach that point as soon as possible. Let me go through some headlines and get to some of the stories I mentioned earlier. Here's a few headlines from this week. I think we need to plug this into the entire big picture again. Things are unfolding very rapidly. And as things start to implode, as the game becomes much more desperate, we will see fighting within the power structure a fracturing, just like mafia families that start to fight when there's not enough turf to go around, not enough resources. And things are starting to fray apart like that now. And this is in our favor. As the power structure starts to infight, that's in our favor. And we need to try to accelerate that by bringing things to light, like climate engineering. Here's some headlines for this week. With Hillary Clinton's email lies unraveling, 147 FBI agents are on her heels. Great. That's a great thing. Who can look at Hillary Clinton and see anything other than a power structure con artist? That's all she is. But on that note, are any of the candidates any different? Really? Really? How many false hopes for how many decades have we all had? Anybody that's a threat to this power structure would not make it far. Period. Keep that in mind. If you're putting your hope on any candidate, I don't care who it is, you're living in a false reality. It's not going to happen. It's not going to change reality. Remember Kennedy? Remember how long he lasted? When he spoke out against the power structure and truly became what the power structure perceived as a threat, how long did Kennedy last? A week? That's it. And the power structure is much more powerful now. Although, again, they're human, they're not invincible, they're infighting, and their day will come. Period. Another headline. MSNBC host admits Democratic Party rigged, while station simultaneously rigs coverage. It's the same on both sides of the coin. Not picking on one side or the other. It's the same on both sides. Period. Trump, no difference. No difference between the parties. Whole system. It's a cancer of destruction and deception. Period. Twain said, Mark Twain, one of my favorite authors. In fact, his book, The Damned Human Race, his best essays. Encourage anybody to look at a copy of that. In fact, I purchased 4 cases of that book and gave it away to anyone who said they would read it. Very, very insightful essays. Twain said, it's not what you know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just isn't so. How often is that true? People that are so sure of things because that's what they've been told by many of their peers, so they choose to believe it. No investigation, no looking into hard data or research, nothing. They just accept it. Another headline. First ocean freight rates collapse to zero. Zero. China freight index plunges to record low. Bailouts loom. Shipping is crashing all over the globe. Industrial civilization is unwinding, period, by the day. Another headline. Russia continues gold accumulation as the West sells. The West is selling because the West is preparing for World War III. And they want resources they can use, like military hardware and so forth. So they're apparently not too worried about the precious metals at this point. We'll see how this all plays out. But the power structure is fractured. Again, there's different cards being played by different sides of those fractures. And it's going to get interesting soon. Another headline. Spike in defaults. Standard & Poor's gets gloomy. Blames Federal Reserve. Infighting. Again, as the system of greed and corruption begins to fall apart, as there's not enough to go around, this will continue. Another headline. Saudi economy shows more signs of strain as spending drops. The sand empire of Saudi Arabia, the black gold, it's not so profitable anymore as industrialized civilization starts to grind to a halt. And as the links in the chain start to drop out of this incredibly balanced paradigm in places like Saudi Arabia and Dubai, illusions of industrialized society that can't and won't continue. They won't. It's over. All who have bought into that delusion, building these massive cities on sand, not going to last. Another headline. CIA-armed militias are shooting at Pentagon-armed militias in Syria. Same situation. More fracturing. So we have different branches of our government arming different militias. And militia is really just a name for a terrorist group at this point, isn't it? That's what it is. They're arming various terrorist groups who are then fighting amongst each other. And certainly ISIS is a part of that. And how much do we hear over here about ISIS and how much we should fear ISIS? And we should. I'm not saying ISIS isn't bad. I'm not saying that the people in ISIS aren't barbaric beyond belief. That's absolutely undeniable. But who has, again, armed and fueled and funded these groups? And no one can tell me that our military, the most capable in the world, couldn't go mop them up anytime they were allowed to. Just like Vietnam, they're not allowed to. Not allowed to. Not that they should have to. Not that ISIS should even exist, spawned by our own government with John McCain standing with the ISIS leaders. If you don't believe anything I'm saying, look it up. Research it. John McCain telling Sean Hannity on Fox News how intimate he was with the ISIS leaders. Why doesn't anybody pay attention to that when we're being pumped up for the next big terrorist scare? Another headline. The big bust in the oil fields. It's coming. Again, it all comes down to industrial civilization grinding to a halt. One more headline. Arctic sea ice sets wintertime record low. Not high, record low, thanks to global warming. Global warming is really a more accurate figure. Climate change is not. And again, climate change was instituted in 1998 in what was the warmest year recorded to that point. And at that juncture in time, those in power fully unleashed the climate engineering programs, and they knew they would be causing exactly the kind of weather whiplash that I described at the beginning of this show. A warm and cold side to a, quote, winter storm, temperatures that rebound and whiplash from 70 or 80 record highs to snow in 10, 12, 15 hours, and then back up again when the chemically nucleated storm passes through. So, again, remember where the climate change term came from. It came from those who are responsible for climate engineering, those who control all the weather dissemination, those who have put the federal gag order on all National Weather Service and NOAA employees. When people ask you, why is nobody talking about this? If you know some facts, you can respond to such a question. One, government scientists have no First Amendment protection in the first place. Secondly, now we have a federal gag order on all government weather personnel, National Weather Service and NOAA. So when someone asks you again, why isn't anybody speaking out? Reasons like that. Military personnel are certainly not going to speak out. They've all signed confidentiality agreements, period. Now, I want to elaborate. I know some people on my website at geoengineeringwatch.org know about the barrier reef problem, but many who listen live in Northern California on KQMS don't know about this. This is a headline that everyone should see. It should be on major networks everywhere, but it's not, because they want to show us the political dog and pony theater to distract us as long as possible. Here's the headline. Great Barrier Reef coral bleaching at 95% in northern section, aerial survey reveals. The report continues. This will change, this is in quotes from this report, this will change the Great Barrier Reef forever. We're seeing huge levels of bleaching in northern 1,000-kilometer stretch of the Great Barrier Reef. Of the 520 reefs surveyed, only 4 showed no evidence of bleaching. From Cairns to Torres Strait, the once colorful ribbons of reef are ghostly white. This hits home for me because I've been to Cairns and I've been to the Great Barrier Reef on 2 private dive expeditions in the past to see firsthand the damage that was visible even then. And I can only imagine how bad it is now. The report continues. It's too early to tell precisely how many of the bleached corals will die, but judging from the extreme level, even the most robust corals are snow white, which means they're dead. I expect to see about half of those corals die in the coming month, Professor Hughes said. This is the research head of this report. A month. That's the geologic blink of an eye. Half of one of the 7 great wonders of the world will die in a month. And by the way, this is half of the half that's left. half of the barrier reef has already died off in the last 3 decades. But now it's taking 30 days for the other half to die. Can you see how incredibly non-linear our equation is? And I hammer that every week. Our equation is extremely non-linear. For those who think that, well, it took 160 or 70 years to screw the planet up this bad, so perhaps we'll have another 100 or so years before we hit the end of the road. Not true. Not true. That's like, again, leaping off a 100-story building and passing the second story with the sidewalk being the next stop and thinking you have a lot of time left. You don't. If we don't change course immediately and completely, we will soon all be at the end of the road. This report continues. Coral bleaching is caused by abnormally high sea temperatures that kill the tiny marine algae essential to coral health. This is the third global coral bleaching since 1998, and scientists have found no evidence of these disasters before the late 20th century. Think about that statement. For those who say, and I've heard this already from a number of people, oh, this happens all the time. Those are the programmed responses from people who don't investigate. They simply parrot whatever they've heard. They have no real clue about the research. So when you hear somebody saying this has happened before at this scale, it's not true. Paleo data makes that clear. The report continues. We have coral cores that prove 400 years of annual growth, explains Dr. Neil Canton from the Australian Institute of Marine Science. We don't see the signature of bleaching in reduced growth following a bleaching event until the recent 1998-2000 events. This is all recent. Environmental Minister Greg Hunter flew over the reef just 8 days ago before Professor Hughes, again, the survey lead scientist, and announced some additional resources for monitoring the reef. Quote, as we head north of Lizard Island, it becomes increasingly prone to bleaching. I've been there as well. I've been to Lizard Island. I've dove off Lizard Island in the Great Barrier Reef. And it hurts to know what it must look like now. This is all painful to see it happen. Continuing with the report, the north part of the Great Barrier Reef is the most pristine part of the marine park. Another quote, we're seeing climate change play out across our reefs. Professor Justin Marshall, a reef scientist from the University of Queensland, said, the research for these bleaching events was clear. Again is quoted, what we're seeing now is unequivocally due to climate change. The world has agreed this is climate change. We're seeing climate change play out across the reefs. Professor Hughes said he's frustrated about the whole climate change debate. The government has not been listening to us for the past 20 years, he said. It has been inevitable that this bleaching event would happen, and now it has happened. He continues, we need to join the global community in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I want to stop right there because here we have a scientist that is correct about the warm water harming the reef, but it's not just the warm water. It's the unimaginably intense UV radiation. And on both counts, climate engineering is completely implicated, but never mentioned. Never mentioned. Climate engineering in shredding the ozone layer has allowed a great deal more penetrating heat to enter the ocean, which causes a thermal energy buildup. And I'm not saying that the other sources of anthropogenic damage to the planet aren't a factor. Of course they are. Of course they are. We're putting 100 million tons of CO2 in the atmosphere a day. Huge factor. But how can such a dialogue occur over the damage on the Great Barrier Reef and the government's lack of responding to this with no mention of climate engineering? So we all must learn to sift the baby from the bathwater, and these scientists, again, are either, one, completely derelict in their duty. If they're oblivious to climate engineering and they don't know about it, then they're completely unqualified to hold the post they hold. Or two, and this is the most likely, they know they cannot mention climate engineering if they wish to continue to hold the post they hold, their job, their employment. Or maybe much worse, they know they can't mention it. My bet goes on the latter. They absolutely know, but they know they can't mention it. I'll finish for this report. For me personally, and this again is one of the lead researchers with this report, it was devastating to look out of the chopper window and see reef after reef destroyed by bleaching. But really, the emotion is not so much sadness as anger. Again, he states, I'm really angry that the government isn't listening to us, the evidence we've been providing to them since 1998. He said the government had committed $2 billion over the next decade to protect the reef through initiatives such as improving water quality and removing the crown of thorns starfish. Completely unrelated issue, but very destructive. Bottom line is this, as I've said over and over and over in previous shows, governments and the agencies they control, the, quote, public protection and environmental protection agencies like EPA and USDA, U.S. Forest Service, and the rest. Those agencies don't exist as a whole, with some exceptions, but especially with EPA and those types of agencies. They exist to hide problems from the public, not to expose them, but to hide them. And we see direct evidence of that here. Governments are nothing more than state-sponsored mafia and terrorism. That's what they are at this point, period. And a population that wants to simply go about its business and not be bothered by this fact is just as responsible for what's happening as those in power. Just as responsible. The moment you look the other way and turn two blind eyes to what's going on, you're a part of the problem. And we have this happening with environmental groups, which I'm so disgusted with I can't even begin to really articulate the issue. And we have Sierra Club and Greenpeace and all the rest who claim to be trying to save the planet, completely ignoring the single greatest destructive force on the planet at this point in time, which is climate engineering. When we have them ignoring this, they simply are part of the problem. And the same is true with the spiritual institutions. On all sides of that fence, we have spiritual institutions who claim to be following doctrine that states we are required to be good stewards of the planet, we are required to not look away from issues like this, and yet that's all I see them doing. And I've been in Reading, I've been in about every major spiritual institution in Reading. I've passed on mountains of data, I've spoken to the pastors, nothing. And what do I get generally? It's all in big hands, so we're not going to worry about this. Show me in Scripture where it says that. Show me. And I've read through biblical text twice. A lot of great rules for life there. A lot of nuggets. I don't argue that. Show me in biblical text where it says it's okay to sit on the bench and do nothing because it's all in big hands. It doesn't say that. I accept whatever comes as long as I'm doing my best to be a part of the cure and not the disease. And I hope we see that sort of attitude from some of the leaders of the spiritual institutions around the globe, because right now they're doing nothing. Nothing. Now, on to another report. This is from the Washington Post. It's important we read between the lines on this one. As the planet flashes warning signs, U.S. and China pledge hasty signing of climate accord. Again, from the Washington Post. Against a backdrop of troubling news from the planet, including a scientific upgrade of expectations for sea level rise, we talked about that in previous shows, sea levels are rising at least 10 times faster than the former worst case predictions. So that's starting to be acknowledged. Why? Because they can't hide it any longer. The report continues. Because of faster melting Antarctica is melting also, in spite of the headlines that people have seen that they think it's all expanding everywhere. The only reason there's sea ice expanding in some places of Antarctica is because there's so much fresh water running off the melting land ice that it's desalinating the bays around Antarctica, and fresh water freezes at about 4 degrees higher temperature. Also, we have geoengineering and chemical ice nucleation going on there. Also, we have falsification of data that makes it look like the ice is growing when it's not. So I'll continue with this. The U.S. and China on Thursday pledged to jumpstart their climate action plans. Now, their plans are to further cooperate with yet more ramped up geoengineering programs. That's what's happening behind the curtain. All this other theater is just that. It's theater. It's to pacify the type of environmental groups I just outlined, like 350.org and Bill McGibbon, and these people who are put on pedestals by their followers when they completely ignore and deny the greatest single assault against the web of life ever launched by the human race that's staring us in the face every day above our heads, raining toxic materials down on us, killing everything. And we have the quote-unquote environmentalists across the board ignoring this. The climate change people, and I know plenty of them in the Reading area, absolutely ignoring this issue. People who are going on and on about climate change, and I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm not saying that anthropogenic activity isn't a huge part of the problem. I've never said that. It's a massive part of the problem. But the biggest single factor of all is climate engineering, and we have local environmentalists and global warming groups who have presentations and never even mention climate engineering in any context. How hypocritical is that? It's unimaginable to me, absolutely unimaginable. And on the other side of the fence, by the way, we have those who acknowledge climate engineering but don't acknowledge any other form of human damage to the planet. That's just as deplorable. It's just as bad. Massive denial on both sides of the fence. If that denial doesn't go away soon and we don't have everyone marching together for a common cause, it's game over. But I want to continue with this report. The world's two largest emitters issued a joint statement saying that they will sign the Paris Climate Agreement negotiated late last year to put the world on a path to lowering greenhouse gas pollution. On April 22nd, the date of a long-planned signing ceremony and the first day that countries can sign. April 22nd is also Earth Day. The U.S. and China further said that they would, quote, take their respective domestic steps in order to join the agreement as early as possible this year and called on other countries to do likewise, with a view to bringing the Paris Agreement into force as early as possible. Our two countries, this is quote, with a joint statement are making an important step forward in building on the success of Paris by urging and encouraging swift entry into force of that agreement, said Brian Deese, senior advisor to the President Obama, on a press call. The Paris Accord set a target of limiting the globe's warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels, and trying to hold warming to 1.5 degrees C if possible. I want to stop at that point for a moment. This is all smoke and mirrors. The Paris conference was a farce, an absolute theatrical farce. All of this is designed to, again, pacify people into thinking someone somewhere is taking care of it. Behind the scenes, all the major powers are simply negotiating on how to further ramp up climate engineering because that's all they're invested in, period. They're not about to change business as usual. Those who run the powers that be are also completely invested into climate engineering. They're not about to give it up unless or until we expose to the world, to populations of the world, exactly what's happening in our skies. So in regard to the temperatures, we're already above 2 degrees C. And in fact, data from the ground, in every place that we check and monitor, we're seeing a radical under-reporting of temperatures, not an over-reporting, an under-reporting. In fact, so much so, we regularly see 4 and 5 degrees, sometimes even more, under-reporting. What does that mean in the bigger context? It means that we're well above 3 degrees C of warming right now. Humans have not existed on the planet above 3.5 degrees C baseline. And we're in free fall to perhaps 5, 6, or 7 degrees C of warming in the blink of an eye. And the reef proves that. The Great Barrier Reef die-off in 30 days proves that. So for those who think that our current paradigm is going to continue plugging along, you're going to be in for a rude awakening soon. Wait and see. The deception of this report continues. The news comes as the planet continues to set temperature records regularly. Now this is true in the sense that there are records, but the actual temperatures on the ground, again, appear far higher than even what this report states. The report states January exceeded the 1951 to 1980 average by 1.3 degrees C, and February exceeded it by 1.35 degrees C. So here you have the Paris Accord stating that they're going to somehow magically hold the global temperature at or below 1.5 C by 2100, and we're already there. We're past there. All these theatrical goings-on are simply designed to pacify the population while the power structure digs in and prepares for total collapse. That's what's happening. I want to finish with this report. Meanwhile, the combination of climate warming and El Nino has triggered severe bleaching of parts of the iconic Great Barrier Reef. Again, I covered that already on a previous report. And the threat of rising seas, the major concern of a block of small island nations that drove urgency in the Paris Agreement, looks a lot worse. In other words, the reality on the ground looks a lot worse. In a new computer modeling study, the research found that with unchecked emissions, Antarctica could double currently expected sea level rise by 2100, from around 1 meter at the high end to closer to 2 meters, over 6 feet. Now, again, we have a radical downplaying of the severity of what's happening. They refer to 2100. Other reports by frontline scientists say that we could see 3 meters of sea level rise in a decade, in the next decade. So, if these scientists were not being radically conservative the whole time, why would the reports from the front lines keep being worse and worse and worse, as we've said they were for the last decade, for 10 years? I've adamantly stood on that fact that the data is far, far worse than anything we're being told. I've again and again and again stated, yes, Al Gore and his data are wrong. They're radically wrong, but in the opposite direction of what most people are wishfully choosing to believe. It's far, far worse than anything Al Gore ever said. And we have climate engineering on top of the equation, making everything worse still. And the more people know that, and there's so many people who think, well, you can't admit to global warming because then that would help sell climate engineering. That's not true. That statement is not true. One, not admitting to the truth never helps anything. Clinging to a lie never helps anything. The planet's not just warming, it's in total meltdown. It's in what is more accurately termed a climate shift. But if people understand that, and they have some credibility, and they also understand, because the data supports the conclusion, that climate engineering is making the entire situation far worse, not better, then how can they sell climate engineering if people know that? They can't. Never. And they know it. And if we have such a position where people understand what's really happening to the planet, and climate scientists who know that the geoengineering is going on and want to come out, they will be more willing to come out and join with groups who recognize, yes, the planet is warming and climate engineering is making it far worse. That's a very simple mantra that can't be argued. The data supports that completely. I want to finish with this report. The new statement by the U.S. and China does not refer to any particular scientific or atmospheric developments. Asked on a press call about how the climate system is currently behaving, Todd Stern, the State Department's special envoy for climate change and the top negotiator for the country in Paris, responded that Paris gives us a chance. Paris puts us on the right path with the right structures built into it. But there's no time to lose. We know that, and the evidence from the natural world keeps telling us that louder and louder. This is less than a half-truth. This is just simply more deception. Those in power know exactly what's going on. They know you could shut down everything tomorrow, and we will still hit the wall, period, because there's too much inertia behind the damage already done. But all this discussion about reducing carbon is complete deception. They have no intention for reducing carbon. They simply intend to ramp up climate engineering to ever larger levels. Period. The final segment of this report. The Paris Agreement does not come into force until 2020, and there has long been concern about what happens in the period between now and then. It also requires 55 separate countries, which in turn represent 55% of global emissions, to sign and ratify the document for it to come into effect. Joining the Paris Agreement follows a two-step process. Countries must sign agreement and then also indicate their consent to join and be bound by it as parties, explains World Resources Institute. Hence, the early signal from the U.S. and China is significant. If these huge emitters are taking swift implementation actions, then it will be easier to hit the required threshold. However, the U.S.'s actual ability to cut emissions also depends in part on the administration's Clean Power Plan. It goes into other details and rhetoric from there. Here's the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. They have no intention of stopping business as usual, and nothing tangible came from the Paris Agreement. Nothing. Many have claimed that geoengineering is going to be legalized, that that's what Paris was all about. There is no data to support that. Nothing. There is no sign that there is any initiation to even acknowledge climate engineering in any way, shape, or form. In fact, the effort to hide it is becoming stronger than ever. So we see no credible indication that there is any intent to even admit to geoengineering, let alone legalize it. So it's back to critical mass. It's back to all of us. It's back to putting this issue on the radar once and for all for populations around the globe so that they can all know, in every country, every individual, every citizen can know that they have been a part of a grand and lethal experiment without their knowledge or consent that has permanently damaged their health, their children's health, and the planet on which they and their children's future depends. Period. We need to reach that point of critical mass. If we don't, nothing left to salvage. Period. Nothing. Now, here's one more report I want to get to quickly so I can have enough time to go over some health input that I know people would like to, or I believe people would like to hear. We all certainly want to try to stay healthy. This is from AP, AP Press report. Meteorologists may soon be able to predict likelihood of extreme heat in the eastern United States as much as 50 days in advance, according to a new study. Now keep in mind, this is the scheduled weather we're talking about here, because there is no natural weather at this point. Nothing. Those who don't believe that simply haven't done the research. Even small-scale intervention can affect the entire climate system, because it's all interlinked. But when you have complete global saturation of the atmosphere with toxic, heavy metal, electrically conductive particulates that are being microwaved from countless locations, completely derailing and manipulating everything from the jet stream to precipitation patterns, there is no natural weather. So for any study to say that they can predict 50 days in advance when a heat wave is going to come, we're talking about the scheduled weather, nothing less than that. And so for all those who participate in these reports, or all those who publicize them, report on them, and pretend that this is in any sense legitimate, they're all liars. They're all a part of the problem. And if they don't realize that they're lying, then they're unbelievably derelict in their duty. In either case, they need to be exposed, period. I want to finish this report. A team of scientists looking for links between heat waves and the water temperature in the North and Central Pacific found a correlation strong enough, they said it could be used to make a, quote, skillful prediction of extra warm and dry weather about 7 weeks before the temperatures rise. Now, again, reports like this are designed to condition the population to accept that they will be told what the scheduled weather is months in advance, and somehow that's just a prediction of a natural weather system. This is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. How accurate were they with El Nino this year? Even though they're looking at weather models that are done by the geoengineers, Raytheon does all the weather modeling for National Weather Service and NOAA. By the way, those agencies, again, have federal gag orders on them. So we have the geoengineers doing the modeling for the weather forecasters, and even then, completely off on their predictions, completely. They can't get it right the next day half the time, and they're the ones manipulating the weather. And engineering, again, way too dignified a term. They're simply disrupting the weather everywhere and destroying the life support systems of the planet at the same time. Continuing from the report, they will start trying to forecast eastern heat waves starting in May, said climate scientist Karen McKinnon, lead author of the study published Monday in Nature Geoscience. All these organizations bought, sold, and paid for. And if Karen McKinnon, the lead author of this study, is not aware of climate engineering, again, she does not deserve to hold her post, or she's lying. In either case, doesn't deserve to hold her post. And people like Karen McKinnon should be contacted with her public email and exposed. She should be sent data on climate engineering, and as many credible people as possible CC'd in that communication. Don't threaten people. Don't do that. We have to have the U.S. military on our side. We have to have law enforcement that's currently being manipulated in many regions. We have to have them on our side. They're being lied to as well. The military personnel flying these aircraft are being lied to. I personally spoke to a KC-135 pilot some time back who didn't know what he was doing up there. He's a nice individual. He should know, and he should have a responsibility to know, but he didn't. Went back, asked questions. Last data I got about him was he was medicated behind a desk. That's how the system works. So it's up to us as a whole to share credible data, to put people like the author of this study, Karen McKinnon, on notice with data on climate engineering, credible data, of which we have mountains of it. We have Senate documents, we have military documents, we have congressional documents, presidential reports. Send them credible data, CC as many people as you can with that, and put that on notice, that now we know they know. And that's how you flush these people out. That's how you make them think about what they're doing, that they're lying, that the public is waking up to the fact that they're lying, and that once the public is fully awake, I can only imagine the public will hold them legally and morally responsible for their behavior, for their participation in these crimes, which makes them an accessory to the crimes, period. So find these kinds of studies. Help us expose these people, because right now, the human race and planet Earth is comparable to what happened on Easter Island. For those of you who don't know what happened on Easter Island, an island paradise, the population exhausted their resources without any consideration of the consequences until their civilization collapsed. They resorted to cannibalism, and the entire paradigm they had known was no more. That's the track we're on right now, period. Okay, so while I have a little bit of time, I want to finish up on what I stated last week about how do we stay healthy and functioning while living in a toxic soup on a dying planet. That's the paradigm we're in right now. Let's hope we can change course. It's going to take all of us to do that. The healthier we are, the better chance we might have. Now, again, I want to state this. I'm not giving medical advice. I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm simply stating what I do. I advise anyone to talk to a nutritionalist and garner your own program from that. So to recap what I briefly stated last week, clean water, essential. Our bodies are majority water, 70-75%, depends on the study you examine. Clean water is essential. As I stated last week again, if you're drinking distilled water, you're flushing beneficial minerals out of your system. If you're chelating with any substantial chelation elements, you're flushing beneficial minerals out of your system as well. You need to replace those minerals. I went into a book called Eat Right for Your Type. I again recommend that. I went over last week that fats are your friend. Fats are the single most important food you can eat. Fats have been demonized by a power structure that has no interest in your health. Essential fat lipids, all your hormones are made from them, 230 plus, I believe. You're not going to get far without essential fat lipids. And fats don't make you fat if they're the correct fats. They don't. And they're essential if you want to be healthy, period. Your cells have a molecular cloud around them of fat. And that's how your cells communicate. And when that membrane becomes mutated from trans fats, for example, the communication breaks down, your body breaks down with it. Again, fats are your friend. Hemp seed oil that you can buy in any health food store. This is not a narcotic of any kind. This is in your health food store along with flax oil, along with olive oil. Very beneficial. Flax oil also beneficial. For those that are local, in fact, at Orchard Nutrition in Reading, the vitamin section there, very, very educated help personnel in that section who know about climate engineering. They can help you get on a protocol that will make you healthier if you live in the Reading area. If you want information on geoengineering, by the way, that's there too. It's free. We don't sell anything. I don't endorse anything. I don't endorse or sell any product, period. I never will. I will never commercialize anything. So everything is free. Orchard Nutrition can help you. They've been very helpful in the fight against climate engineering. I recommend anybody that lives in the Shasta County area, go see them. Don't eat heavy meals at night. I went over that last week as well, saying from Europe, from where my family is from, part of my family, that the saying there is to keep breakfast to yourself, share lunch with a friend, and give dinner to your enemy. Just a saying, something to remember. Supplements I went over last week again. Turmeric, monolaurin, a coconut derivative, olive leaf extract, cayenne, garlic, ester C, calcium, magnesium, potassium, B vitamins. Now, when I mention all these supplements, we have a lot of different elements that I'm not suggesting people take every day at all. What I take every day is I take about 2,000 milligrams, 2 grams of ester C, vitamin C, and I take that with calcium because the two are necessary to take together. They're beneficial taken together. And I spread that out through the course of a day. And a quality calcium supplement is essential as well. And with that, we all know we need vitamin D, right? And many people who know about geoengineering know that about 98% of the population of this country is vitamin D deficient. Well, no wonder. When we have light scattering particles filling the atmosphere, when we have global dimming at 25 to 30%, global dimming referring to the amount of direct sunlight that no longer reaches the surface of the planet, because that's the express goal of solar radiation management. And how many days do we look up and see either horizon-to-horizon trails or a silvery white sky with wispy, cobwebby-looking clouds floating around? And almost always in the evenings, there'll be substantial spraying in the western sky, so it looks like there's some sort of smoke on the horizon, because smoke is a particulate as well. And how used to this have people become? They don't even question the fact that we never have clear skies. It's always either silvery white at best, and generally cobwebby clouds floating around that are the remnant of the sprayed aerosols. And we have, again, predicting the weather, as I've stated over and over, we have meteorologists like our local Mike Kruger and others who somehow know days in advance that we'll have some mostly sunny days. Mostly sunny when there's not a natural cloud in the sky. There's only the cobwebby, hazy, or perhaps long lingering trails, depending on the day. It's all spray. Horizon-to-horizon trails are only a part of the aerosol operations. We can have lots of days where it's just silvery white. That's still aerosol spraying. And how do our meteorologists know that days in advance, that it will be mostly sunny? Because they're reading from a script. They're reading from a script because they want their paycheck and pension, so they're just actors in a play. That's all they are. And I would argue that's a very cowardly position to be in, period. Now, on nasal sprays, for those who are fighting constant respiratory problems, fungal sinusitis, again, as I said last week, it's epidemic. According to the Mayo Clinic, 95% of all chronic sinusitis is fungal, not bacterial, which means when your ENT gives you antibiotics, he's actually making you worse, not better. It's better to allow your body to fight it off if you can. That's my opinion. And to not use the same type of nasal spray over and over. Olive leaf extract is a great spray. Colloidal silver as well. Grapefruit seed extract, nasal spray or capsules. Mix things up. You can rotate. Certain things you should take regularly, like minerals, C, calcium, potassium, B vitamins. But some of the other supplements like olive leaf and turmeric, monolaurin, or grapefruit seed extract, those I mix up depending on how affected I might feel from whatever's in the air at a given time. Now, on inflammation, again, that's a huge part of all problems in the body. So eat foods that are anti-inflammatory. Lots of water, no sugar. Keep your body alkaline, not acidic. And you can mix, by the way, apple cider vinegar mixed into your water throughout the day is a great way to keep your body more alkaline. And you can test this with a litmus paper. You can test your saliva to see, do it between meals, because if you're just eating, that's going to affect the acidity. But you can test your body for alkalinity with litmus paper. And there's no substitute for sleep, by the way. Sleep hygiene is critically important. And for supplements there, I use, and I'm not recommending anybody do or don't, but this is what I use. I often use GABA, which is an amino acid, which is very helpful for relaxing and slowing down the neurological activity. Melatonin, valerian root, chamomile. Probiotic foods, also very important. And lysine, also a good antiviral. Exercise indoors. If it's spraying going on outside, keep it indoors. Staying healthy requires a consistency of care, of investigating, of properly polishing one's perspectives and philosophy. Our immune system directly responds to our mental state. This is science fact. The only way to stay productive and effective in the fight for the common good is to stay healthy as possible. Thus, we have a responsibility to do our best to stay strong. As the days, weeks, and months go by, the challenges we face are going to grow exponentially worse. Letting go of what was is essential in order to more effectively face what is. We're all in a literal fight for our lives, and if we give this fight the commitment and focus it deserves, perhaps we may yet salvage what is left of Earth's life support systems. Perhaps we may yet salvage the future. Make your voice heard. Wake others. Never give up. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org.